Good morning, this is Chris Marr, and welcome to my ongoing series of legal questions and answers. Good morning. I want to talk this morning about what we commonly call Miranda rights. And the reason I bring it up is because in all the years that I'm practicing law, it never ceases to amaze me how many people have been through what we'll refer to as the legal system, which means they've been involved in some type of criminal case, have been charged with a crime, or a family member of somebody who's been charged with a crime, sometimes very serious crimes. And the person always says, well, they never read me or whoever they're referring to, they never read us Miranda rights. And Miranda is a case that everybody knows because in 1966, the U.S. Supreme Court decided a case, Miranda versus Arizona. And Miranda versus Arizona really stands for the proposition that, like people know from watching TV, you have the right, that word is the most important, the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will, remember that part, be used against you, okay? And the rest of it involves other rights that you have. If you can't afford a lawyer, you can have one appointed, you have the right to an attorney, etc., etc. But the first part of it is the part that most people know because they've watched so many TV shows and series, or have seen the card, or have been present when it's been read, if nothing else, to them. And the reason that I speak about it is because the people who are in that situation come to see me because they've been arrested. And time and again, countless times over many years of doing this, I see in the paperwork that the person has had those rights read to him or her, or knows, even if they haven't heard those words read by a police officer, to them in some terrible setting, like on the side of a road, or where they're in some situation where they know they are in deep trouble, or potentially gonna be. And yet the person, even after they've been through the system numerous times, waives those rights. You, if you are going to be charged with a crime, are the only person who can waive those rights. And waiver of those rights puts you sometimes in a much worse situation because you have that right, as I said, to remain silent. Now let's take the classic situation where the person's driving down the road, the person's pulled over, the police officer comes up to the car, you're sitting there looking through your rear view and your heart's jumping out of your chest, okay, at oftentimes 2-3 o'clock in the morning, oftentimes you're alone in the car, oftentimes you're coming from someplace where if they know where you're coming from, they put 2 and 2 together and they're not coming up with 5 and realize that, you're going to tell them about the only place open at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, which is a bar, okay, and the police officer comes up to the car, and says whatever they're going to say, which is typically license and registration, or where are you coming from, or the clincher is, have you been drinking or consuming any drugs of any kind? And all of a sudden, your heart's exploding. You say to yourself, well, he or she, meaning the officer standing 2 inches away from your window, knows, they must know certain things about me from observing my, let's say, bloodshot eyes, or smelling something that smells like an alcoholic beverage coming from my breath. So they all of a sudden implode, okay, and begin to talk about everything that's going on, including, oh, I just had 15 beers and I've got a bunch of drugs in the trunk, and you can look through my car, and it shouldn't and it can't work that way, because if you pull over on the side of the road, you got to remember what Miranda said so long ago, and you got to remember that even if people say, well, they never read me my Miranda rights, the reason they don't necessarily read them to you on the road at that point is because there's a lot of court decisions that have said that that situation, you being on the side of the road, behind the wheel of your car, with a cop standing at your window, and oftentimes you don't realize there's a second cop or trooper or somebody, or a sheriff's deputy standing at the passenger side at the rear of your vehicle, and you don't even know it then, okay? because let's say you're a little distracted, that if you answer, and I say this to clients all the time, if you give a truthful answer, and that answer is going to incriminate you, okay? Like, yes, I've been drinking all night. Yes, I got drugs or guns or something else in the trunk, et cetera, et cetera. You have to make that decision whether you're going to say anything, because Miranda says right to remain silent, okay? And license and registration and insurance, that's easy. Pull them out of your wallet. Always, always have them accessible in your wallet. Don't say, oh, I think I saw my registration in the bottom of my glove compartment, and what you really mean is the console or on the floor in the back, because some of us tend to keep our cars a little less neat than others. Have those documents available. And before we even get there, have your car in good running condition. Don't have that burned out tail light that you've been swearing you're going to get fixed for 6 months, or the headlights out, because at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, if some law enforcement agent sees that, they're going to pull you over, which they may and probably won't do if it's 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you got to make that decision whether you're going to waive those rights by talking and fully and freely admitting to things that obviously, as we sit here today and you listen to these words, they clearly will get you in trouble. Yeah, I've been, doing coke all night, or I've been drinking. And I tell you, you think it's crazy, but I got people come into my office every day. How many times have you been arrested before this? Oh, 3, 4, 5. Did you get Mirandized? Yeah. So why did you waive those rights? And are those your initials on the side of the waiver sheet that says you waived your right to remain silent, you waived your right to request an attorney? Okay, give them license, registration, and insurance. And I tell people all the time, I don't tell my clients to lie. What I tell them is that you got to think, if I give them this factually accurate and truthful answer, and even if it's not, you say, well, I only told them I had one. That's a classic. That's still a very damaging admission while you're on the side of the road at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the cop knows because he or she's been driving around the parking lot outside the neighboring bar for the last 5, 6, 8 hours, and your car's been sitting there in front, and there's only one Corvette with the top down. You got it? Okay, and that's what happens. And then they see that same distinctive car 3, 4 miles away, and it's 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and there's nobody on the road, and the car's going back and forth, And during the day, that's not going to necessarily get you jammed up. But 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, those officers need to remain awake, because if they're not traveling behind you or in front of you and turning around, most likely they're bored to tears. And you have to understand that if you exercise that right to remain silent, and if you don't, it does not mean they're not going to do something to you. They're going to surmise or suppose that something else is going on. But what you've done is, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to say, put your hands behind your back, okay, after you get out of the car, and let's go down to the police station and talk about this. What it means is, you have not given any incriminating factual information to that police officer that you wish the moment it leaves your mouth that you could get back in. Like, I had 15 beers over the last 5 hours and I'm on Xanax, et cetera, et cetera. And that is a common factual admission that people get these days. The whole world seems to be on medication, and it's always medication that says in that yellow strip on the side of the vial, don't drink. Okay, and yet the person finds themselves out, and now they got themselves in a tough spot. Okay, and if you say to yourself, well, I knew that lawyer, he handled the closing on my home 27 years ago, maybe I'll call him or her at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. If you're going to exercise that right to an attorney, have that information, how I get in touch with that attorney at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Have it right there, because the police are not in the position where they're going to stand around on the side of the road for 45 minutes while you go through some type of call your lawyer index, okay? You got a phone number, you got somebody you can contact. In my experience, unless it's something that's totally out of the ordinary, the officer will let you call. But you must understand that if you call your attorney Don't be talking to them and whispering to them, I just said blah, 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 blah. You know, you got to make sure that you have privacy in your phone call. And very often, you'll find that state trooper barracks are old and antiquated and very small and there's no privacy. Or that there's a desk right next to where you are where another police officer is working on another case, and you think, well, they're not paying attention to my case while you're back at the police precinct or the station house or the sheriff's department. Understand that the information you're going to talk to someone such as myself about is information you don't want anybody to know about. All right? So very often the person says to me, oh, you know, I refuse to take the test. That has its own set of issues going on and presumptions about the people who refuse to blow into the machine, who don't do so, and then they second guess it, or they decide, well, I'm not blowing in the machine, but I'm going to tell them where I was for the last 7 hours and how many things I had to drink of an alcoholic nature and what kind of drugs. And it doesn't work like that. If you're going to exercise that right to remain silent, and the other part of Miranda, the right to counsel, understand how that works. And there's a limit on those rights. And they're your rights, and don't give them up, okay? And as I said, it doesn't mean you get to go home. It simply means that you are now understanding that it may take a while for those things to play out, and you may still be charged with a crime, but you have made the case against you a case that somebody like me can look at and say, you know, this guy has not made any damaging admissions to any law enforcement agents. He or she has exercised their Miranda rights that even if they weren't told what they are, they apply to your case, okay? And don't give them up. Because if you give them up, what you find is that as time is going on, and it's now 2019, that you will find that the courts are making a determination to whittle away at those rights that were guaranteed in the case of Miranda back in 1966, and which everybody seems to know. Because the only case I ever hear anybody talking about is Miranda. They didn't read me my Miranda rights. They didn't tell. There's certain times when they have to, and on the side of the road, they don't have to. At this point, if it's a standard roadside pullover, get out of the car, do you know why I stopped you, all that stuff. If it's some other situation, and it's a situation where someone has been badly hurt in an accident, and you have alcohol or drugs or both in your system, whether they are prescribed by a doctor or not, okay, you can very well be subjected to being prosecuted for something a whole lot worse than a first-time DWI with a license suspension or a limitation. You can be prosecuted for something that can land you in a jail cell. And it's those scenarios that I find come across my desk most of the time. So if you have any questions about any aspect of what I'm talking to you about this morning, just call the number that you see appear at the bottom of this video, and I'll be happy to talk to you more about it. And don't wait around till you get arrested, till you get the tickets, till the day you go to court to start talking to somebody. Because especially with respect to DWI and any crime involving operating a motor vehicle where it's claimed that your ability to do so is impaired by drugs and or alcohol, if you wait till the last minute or you bump into somebody in the courthouse while you're there for an arraignment on that kind of a case, you're going to find that whoever the judge is, however nice you think they are, and if they're some judge up where we are, that they married everybody in town and you grew up with them and stuff, they have an obligation to take immediate action against your driver's license. And once you start losing that right to your full unrestricted driver's license, you find that getting it back becomes a whole lot tougher than you ever thought. So call me anytime.